everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gitte Mary and today we are going to be talking about certificates, period. This is going to be quite a mouthful, so I am also thinking that I'm going to have to be making more videos, a part 2 and a part 3 at least, in order to get everything. But I also have a blog post down below that I will gradually update. We're going to be talking about certificates. There are so many different types of green, sustainable, vegan, etc. certificates, and we're going to go through them and talk about what they mean and specifically what they don't mean. Also, this sound is going to be annoying at some point. Maybe it already is. I want to make this video/series to make it easier for consumers to navigate, so we have more information when we have to make a decision regarding a certain product. So without further ado, let's just get into it. Yay! It's not as simple as certificate equals sustainability. Darn, I wish it was. Especially considering that many consumers don't always know what the certificate represents. That some companies might imply a certificate means something that it does not, or that a company will create symbols or labels that mimic respected certificates in order to benefit from the increasing consumer interest in sustainability. These are some of the issues we're going to be talking about, but I also have some other important points that I think I want to mention before we really get into the certificates. Okay. Many certificates are really expensive to acquire, which means that it might exclude smaller companies that might be 10 times more sustainable than the big billion-dollar corporation with the certificate. This is something that's super important to keep in mind, that in many cases the certificate practice, the licensing of certificates, is actually a business that needs income, that needs profit. Certificates and the certification practice alone will not necessarily inspire sustainable change. We still need the industry and politics to be involved in order to really achieve sustainable business practices. For instance, politics that demand more transparency in companies' supply chains. And lastly, not all certificates are created equal. Some certificates are created and licensed through third-party regulation, which sort of ensures a transparency and that everything is up to par in many cases. And other labels and certificates are created in-house, which means that they are created by the company for the company without any external regulation. So those two are kind of important to keep apart, and they're not always super visibly different. So let's get into it. First of all, we have BCorp, which is certified by the B Lab. The BCorp is a general certificate that is founded on the belief that good and ethical businesses have to participate and assist governments and NGOs in solving problems of poverty, inequality, and climate change. BCorp certified businesses are legally required to create advantages that not only benefit the profiteers and the shareholders of the company, but that equally benefits the communities and the entire supply chain. Companies that want to get certified BCorp has to be assessed based on their environmental impact as well as their social responsibility, aka their entire supply chain has to be both environmentally and socially responsible. BCorp has tons of free-for-all resources and information that can help every company, and their actual certification license starts at $1,000 and then it's increased with the company's revenue. If we're looking at BCorp from a more critical perspective, most of the requirements to qualify for the BCorp certificate are rather vague. It's not completely straightforward for the consumer to figure out how a company is creating benefits for communities or how a company is being environmentally responsible. There's also no requirement for a company to publish sustainability reports on the website, so sometimes you will be able to find proof of change and sometimes you won't. Then we have a 1% for the planet. 1% for the planet is not necessarily a certificate per se, it's actually more of a partnership program, and it's founded by the founder of Patagonia, which to my knowledge is also a pretty sustainable activewear, outdoor wear clothing brand. 1% for the planet is basically a voluntary tax where a company can choose to donate 1% of their annual revenue to a sustainability charity. As such, the 1% for the Planet partnership is not really a certificate that can tell the consumer anything about the company's supply chain, about what they pay their workers, about if they pay their workers fair wages, if they use pesticides. It's not really something that tells you something about the product, but what the company chooses to do in addition to their own products. The 1% for the Planet partnership can be a super legit thing. I have seen tons of really sustainable and good companies that has other types of certificates use the 1% for the Planet partnership or be engaged in that program as well, but on its own it doesn't really say a whole lot. But I do see companies that are really good that also has this in addition to all their other things. But can it be misused? Yes, absolutely. Because it doesn't really require the company to do anything within their own supply chain, it can also become a green alibi, where a company is not doing anything on its own, but then it's plastering all their products, completely covering them with, we are 1% for the planet company, yeehaw, we're doing so much good. It's kind of up to the individual company what kind of charity they want to support. So as a consumer, you don't really get a whole lot of knowledge based on the fact that they just donate 1% of their total revenue. We do need more information than that, yes, definitely. When I say green alibi, it sort of functions a little bit in the same way like some carbon offsetting programs, which we will get more into, but I think in another video. I already have an impact video about carbon offsetting and what it means and what it does and how it can be kind of problematic because it doesn't really say anything. And it's sort of the same thing with the 1% for the Planet program. It's a really, really good thing, but on its own. Then we have fair trade. Fair trade is a certification based on price. Companies that are fair trade commit to paying farmers a minimum price in case the overall market price falls. Farming practices that are certified fair trade are also committed to using some of their profit to improve the communities around them, like donating to hospitals or building schools and improving education. Companies that are certified fair trade are obligated to pay their workers fair wages, and this generally goes for clothing, different types of garments, but also certain food items, specifically chocolate and coffee, and other items as well. But and there is a but. Research shows that forced child labor has occurred even in the production of fair trade products, and in some cases the wages and working conditions of fair trade farms have been lower than non-certified farms. So the transparency and thoroughness of the certification definitely needs work. But the idea of a third-party certification process in terms of fair wages is a really good idea. Other companies are handling all of this in-house, which means that they set their own regulation and then set their own restrictions. For instance, both Nestle and McDonald's, they have their own fair trade certification where they regulate themselves. And I don't know if you can imagine, but it's not necessarily the most effective process. So the fair trade certification is a really good guideline, but it's absolutely not perfect and it definitely needs work. Then we have guaranteed fair trade, which is not the same as fair trade. Fair trade is certified by Fair Trade International, and guaranteed fair trade is certified by World Fair Trade Organization. Although some of the same criticisms apply here as in fair trade, there are also some benefits I think we should talk about. The World Fair Trade Organization is based on a community of social enterprises, and to join, a company has to be audited, assessed, and peer-reviewed. This certificate is more focused on the enterprise level of a business and its impact, where the previous is very focused on the product level. And I think both are really, really important. As we talked about earlier, we need things higher up to change before the product in our hands can change. Now, this one is a little bit difficult, but we're going to talk about Cradle to Cradle, which is also known as regenerative design. This is a practice of certification that promotes a design and manufacturing practice that aims to utilize materials in a circular system. The Cradle to Cradle certification are given at different levels ranging from basic to bronze, silver, golden, and platinum. It includes 5 categories of standards that businesses has to include, which is material health, material reutilization, renewable energy, water stewardship, and social fairness. The certification fees to get Cradle to Cradle certified starts just right below $2,000 and then moves up to about $18,000 depending on the company and its revenue. To get Cradle to Cradle Platinum certified, a company has to schedule third-party audits, for instance by BCorp, and generally the higher the Cradle to Cradle level, the more requirements call for external inspections and testing, which makes the system more trustworthy. Does that mean Cradle to Cradle products are always sustainable? Well, one of the central concepts in Cradle to Cradle is regenerative design, something that can be used over and over in a closed system and in a circular economy. And that is a good thing. However, in many cases, a 100% closed loop system is not entirely practicable, because resource use on an industrial level and continuous economic growth will always cause environmental harm. In other words, as long as we overconsume stuff and as long as we mass produce so many things, it's very, very difficult to ensure 100% sustainable practices. Overall, the certification practice of Cradle to Cradle is very well rounded, and especially with companies that are certified at the golden or premium level. Now we'll move into another territory, which is the animal related certificates. Now the first one is PETA approved. This is a certificate given by PETA to companies that have filled out a small questionnaire and paid an annual fee of $250. And it ensures that the products of this company do not involve animal products. That's it. That's all I have to say. Now, it is a certificate that makes it easier for people to spot vegan products, and for that I am always grateful. I think it's great when it's easy to navigate what products are vegan and what products are not. With that being said, there are also some issues I think we should talk about. See, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of PETAs. I think they use a lot of their energy in very wrong ways. I think a lot of their strategies are very counterproductive, and I think a lot of the ways with which they act do not necessarily serve the vegan cause in the best way possible. Do they also do good things? Absolutely, yes. But I am not necessarily a completely on board with PETA kind of person, because again, I think it's not a perfect organization by any means. This certificate has also really nothing to do with sustainability other than the fact that animal products are excluded. And that's a good thing. That's definitely a good thing. If you want to know more about animal agriculture, for instance, I have a whole impact video that will give you all the overview that you need. So what I'm saying is that if a $1 billion, nay, even if $1 million company has the only certification that is PETA approved, and that's the only thing they've done in terms of sustainability and any sort of certification, there's a really long way to go. There's a long way to go in terms of materials or manufacturing or recycling or waste management or community support and wages and so on. Let's continue. Because then we have the Leaping Bunny. This is a certificate given by the non-profit organization Cruelty International, and it ensures that no animal testing has been utilized during the production or design of a product. This is a lot more thorough than the PETA approved certificate because it requires more than just a small questionnaire. It generally requires checkups all through the supply chain, so there's definitely a lot less space for people to mess up or ignore the rules. The checkouts are also carried out by a third-party organization, which I always appreciate. I think it goes great together with other certificates because it's a great addition to a larger sustainability effort. However, I often see it given to companies that exploit workers, that pollute fresh water, and that create unnecessary plastic packaging. So again, I wouldn't necessarily call a product just because it is vegan completely and utterly sustainable, because there's so many other things we have to take into account. There's so many more things that a company can do, especially companies with billion or $1 million revenues. Like, they can just do more than slap a vegan stick on there. I would definitely value the Leaping Bunny over the PETA approved one, simply because it has third-party testing and it just has more than a small questionnaire. Now, this is where it gets interesting. A lot of you guys suggested that I also mentioned Certified Humane. So let's talk about that. Certified Humane is an American certificate administered by the Humane Farm Animal Care and should ensure a higher standard of animal practice in the agricultural food sector. When a farm applies to be certified, the organization sends employees to inspect the farm. For chicken farms, for instance, battery cages and debeaking is not permitted, and if you do any of these practices, you will not be able to get the label. You will not be able to get the label. However, the overall standards for certified animal welfare is generally very low, and the standard time before you separate cow and calf is 24 hours. The organization also states that any farm can be certified humane regardless of their size, which I think is a huge problem. The organization itself is also supporting and promoting the idea of further expanding the animal agriculture industry. Even farms that do have grass-fed and range-free livestock still propose a huge environmental problem, as the areas taken up by animal ag far supersedes the areas it would require to grow plants for humans. And pushing for more farms to go free range would require even more space. As such, it seems super empty and untransparent to me to not also include the idea of decreasing the animal ag sector as part of an organization that fights to protect livestock. Needless to say, we cannot keep producing the same amounts of meat that we are today and still call it sustainable or humane. That's just not possible. And also, I think the name Certified Humane implies something about the animal agriculture sector that cannot be, and I think it provides consumers with a false idea and a false narrative of what happens to the livestock in animal agriculture. If I have to put a positive spin on this just for one lousy second, then I would say that it's better to have some restrictions for the animal agriculture sector than having none at all. It's great that the organization is pushing for certain practices to be banned, but I cannot help but notice that the certificate's main goal seems to be more aiming towards protecting farmers who keep livestock and neglects to have any real focus on the environmental consequences of the industry. I also quickly want to add that it feels a little concerning that the requirements of the certificate is stuff like must have access to outdoor areas, must have access to clean water, must have access to the correct nutritional food, and you cannot cut the tails or beaks of the animals. I think this speaks volumes to the standards set by the factory farming industry that this is humane. honey, it's the bare minimum. Now let's talk about the MSC. Marine Stewardship Council Standards is an international non-profit that describes themselves as a labeling system that recognizes sustainable fishing practices. And it was actually formed by the original Worldwide Fund and Unilever back in the 90s. A 2012 UN report showed that 30% of the world's wild fisheries are overexploited and that 57% are closing in on their limit. The MSC certified fishing practices account for about 10% of the global production, and they describe their objective as enforcing sustainable fishing practices that makes fishing infinitely possible. The MSC do not actually certify anyone themselves, but outsource that to 12 third parties. However, there are issues. Although the MSC is a non-profit, only part of their budget comes from grants and donations. The majority comes from their licensing fees, which can exceed $150,000. Before 2006, only 7% of their revenue came from licenses. However, now it's more than 50%, and that can propose some ethical questions about transparency and interest in profit by allowing bigger companies to license their label, even though their standards might be lower. Several experts have also questioned the MSC's commitment to the environment and claims that their focus is increasingly simply just on doing good business, which means allowing bigger companies with more revenue to be licensed, which means that they will earn more money because that's where their money kind of comes from. The MSC also certifies some fisheries with conditions, meaning that they don't actually meet the standards of MSC right now, but they will eventually get there. That can be really problematic for consumers who think that they are now buying a product that is sustainable when in fact they could be buying a product that is becoming sustainable. And there's a big difference there. Lastly, a big problem in the fishing industry right now, and a big problem in our oceans in general, is lost and left behind ghost gear. And the MSC has no plan of action or standard for waste management or ghost gear pollution, which means that a lot of the companies that are still certified sustainable fishing can still be leaving behind a lot of plastic waste. That was the certificates that we got to go over today. I hope you liked this video. You can leave me a like up if you did, and you can subscribe to this channel. It would make my day. And of course, also comment down below and tell me what other certificates you would like to see me include in a part 2. I'm definitely going to make at least 2 or 3 more of these videos because we have a lot of stuff to go over still. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day and take really good care of yourselves. Until next time. Bye! Thank you so much for watching this video, and also a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys help me create green, zero-waste content, and I love you guys. You can find the links to my social media accounts down below and the link to my Patreon on this screen. Bye!